Why are all the boomers liberals now? Or at least the majority of them? I've been pondering this in my mind a lot lately because it's really weird how all of a sudden there have been these huge demographic shifts. I remember my late father once saying to me, because I would sort of get all on a roll ranting about politics. Why isn't this happening? Why can't we do this? Why can't people understand? I say, if this group doesn't start voting this way, then it's over and we're never going to win again. And I don't know what to do. And, kind of just stupid stuff when you're really young. And my dad said to me, Tyler, relax. Things change. And I said, no, they don't. They never change. I've been alive all 19 years of my life. I've been watching politics for, I don't know, 4 years. And things have never changed. Dad, the Hispanics are never going to vote Republican. No, things change. That's what he told me. Things change. He was right. He was right because now, as we know, many of the Hispanics are now voting Republican in large numbers. But that's not what I want to talk about, specifically that tonight. Why are all the boomers now liberal? See, back during that time when I was complaining about how things were going, it was most of the time the case that my peers, my millennial peers, so at that time when I was in high school or whatever, disagreed with my politics. So it was very rare that I found people my age who agreed with me. It didn't matter if they were men, women, whatever. But every now and then you'd find somebody, and of course they had little, clubs, college clubs, and things like that, where you'd find like-minded people. But for the most part, um, I would say mid 2000s, late 2000s. What do they call it? The aughts now. Very difficult to find conservative young people, and it was kind of like an instant connection. Like, oh, you too? What? You believe in low taxes? Awesome, because that's the kind of stuff that you would be worried about back then, even though none of us were paying taxes. Um, but it was the case that most older people, I would say like 50 plus. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that because 50 plus isn't really old, but you get what I'm saying. They, on the other hand, would very frequently agree with me. And it was easier to find people who agreed with me from that age group. Back then, I would listen to Rush Limbaugh. Most of his audience was probably older. And he had, some people who listened to him who were like younger, like me. But I think for the most part, it was typically an older audience. But now everything has just shifted. I noticed this when I was covering the 2024 election, in that Biden's numbers were actually pretty good with boomers and 60, 65 plus, and Trump's were worse, which is a really weird juxtaposition. If you've been following politics for the last 20 years, you know that Republicans typically sweep that cohort. So, but I started to think about, why is that? And I've been reading articles too about how in Canada now, the Conservative Party there is like dominated by Gen Xers and millennials voting for them. It's like their entire base. And the Liberal Party's base is all senior citizens, almost all senior citizens. So I started to think about, why is that? Of course, there are many different theories. But my theory about it is that we are entering an era now of big government. The right and the left are now supporters of big government. The boomers, remember how the boomers were brought up. The boomers were brought up and came of age in the 60s, late 60s and 70s. This was like flower power, revolution, all of that. So the boomers, even the conservative ones, and setting aside maybe boomers who are evangelicals, because that's a whole different um, thing. But boomers are actually liberals. It's just that conservatism became neoliberalism, classical liberalism. So what happened is many of the boomers, because they were kind of libertarian-ish, live and let live type philosophies, they naturally drifted into the conservative camp or the Republican camp because the Republican Party was essentially a libertarian party. So naturally, they started going there. Well, what has happened recently is that the Republican Party, with the help of President Donald Trump and others, has shifted away from being a libertarian party, which I think is a good thing, and more into a party that you would call a more blue collar working class party, populist nationalist party. And so now you have the right, which is populist nationalists. I'm going to get into this a little more specifically. And then you have the left, who is socialist, or at least flirting with it. So on the left, you have people who want the government to take action on rent control, socialization of groceries, socialization of Medicare, all this stuff. More and more government for those issues that they want. But now you have the right who wants more government and more government power, but wants it for their causes. So they want more government to deal with crime. They want more government to deal with cost of living. They want more government to deal with immigration. So we have a consensus now that government needs to take action. And this is why I have said for many years that the libertarianism is nice in theory, but in the end, people are struggling and looking for the government to help them. It doesn't mean they're socialists and want the government to take over everything and give them free handouts. But even on the right, they're looking for some action. They're looking, for example, at an open border and they say, hey, we need the government to deal with that. They're looking at crime and they're saying, hey, wait a second, we need the government to deal with that. So, what does this have to do with boomers? I'm going to bring it all back now. Boomers have not left the libertarian ideals, which are in some senses liberal ideals. They believe in neoliberalism, democratic principles. And what has happened is the right has become, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, this is like purely commentary and analysis here. Of course, you know my opinions on these things. I'm typically on the right. The right has become more and more, they want to say it's tyrannical. It's not tyrannical. It's just that the right is now more interested in wielding government power for its own causes. And of course, boomers do not like that. And they see Trump as like a quasi dictator tyrant type. And the thing that got me thinking about this was a piece in the Atlantic. Let me see if I can pull it up. This piece was going quite viral. The problem is nobody can read it because it's behind a paywall. This is not the one I'm looking for, but it looks like it's talking about the same thing. Here it is. It's called the YOLO presidency. I don't know why they named it that. Kind of a dumb title, to be honest with you, but let me see if I can share the screen. We're not going to be able to read the whole thing again for that reason, but Okay, it's called the YOLO presidency. Trump is focused on becoming one of history's great men. Now, this by the way was meant to be a hit piece on Trump. But I don't really take it that way. I don't really think of this as a hit piece. I think this is actually very good analysis because Trump does not see himself as sort of a president in the same mold as even Reagan or Clinton or any of these people. Trump views himself as like a revolutionary. Trump views himself as a consequential world leader. So let's take a look at what we can read of this. Had President Trump, we wondered, possibly been reading or at least thumbing through, just maybe, the works of Hegel? Impossible. And yet, Hegel's theory of world historical individuals, men who redirected the course of humanity, focused on three figures: Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon Bonaparte. Hegel described them as unlikely heroes of an epoch for upending established orders. One second, sorry about that had previously seemed fixed. They were practical political men who were each condemned in their age for smashing norms and for other conduct obnoxious to moral reprehension, as Trump has been accused of centuries later. And though Trump had long compared himself to America's two great presidents, we were recently told by people who are in a position to know such things, who the heck knows what that means, unnamed source, a senior administration official and a longtime Trump confidant, that the president had, in private conversations, begun thinking about himself less as a peer of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and more as an addition to Hegel's immortal trifecta. This is an important piece, and of course, you're going to have to go behind the stupid paywall to read the rest of it. But the reason I think that it's important to show you this is because this is part of the reason why boomers are now more liberal, or they seem more liberal, because they view Trump and the right now not as George Washington or Reagan or someone like that. They view the right now as Julius Caesar. They view them as strongman leaders, dictatorial leaders. Whether or not this is true, there is a vibe that is the case. And so that's why they are turned off by Trump's bellicose and his grandiosity and all this, because they think that this is like Mussolini or something, which of course is very ridiculous. But there is sort of a little bit of this in the MAGA movement. And personally, I don't think that's such a bad thing. And the reason is, and as I sort of already discussed, younger people, are looking for government to play a role in solving the problems that they think are important. And they believe crime is a problem. They believe immigration is a problem. They believe that job opportunity and cost of living is a problem. The left, the people on the left, the young people on the left, likewise think those things are a problem. Well, maybe not the immigration and the crime so much. They focus on their own issues. Health, the cost of healthcare is a problem. Must fix it. The cost of daycare is a problem. The government must fix it. Education, the teachers aren't being paid enough. We need more government. We need more spending. So you see how both sides are now basically in support of the government being a social engineering tool for their own causes. And this is, I believe, the era that we are going into. So whoever is going to, it's probably way too early to be talking about this, but whoever is going to be looking for, whoever wants to get the nomination for the Republican Party, had better not think that going back to the old tropes of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s about less government, limited government, all this stuff, that is not going to work, because the base of the Republican Party is no longer the same people. The base of the party is populist. The base of the party is younger. And here is the reason why boomers do not want the government to step in and come up with solutions to their problems, because they don't really have many problems. What has happened is the boomers are in, this is a generalization, but still, the boomers are in a time of their lives when they're not looking, they don't care about economic opportunity. They don't care about the cost of living. They don't really care about crime. They're living in neighborhoods now because they've amassed a certain amount of wealth. They're living in neighborhoods now where crime is not a problem. They're not worried about immigration because they're living in neighborhoods where immigration is not felt. The effect of immigration is not felt. Negative, positive, anything. They don't feel any of it. Why would they be in support of a party and a leader who says we're going to deal with immigration and we're going to use the government to do it? We're going to deal with crime and we're going to use the government to do it. They don't like that because there's nothing there for them. It's a solution to a problem that they do not have. Therefore, they are less and less attracted to the Republican Party anymore, to conservative right-wing politics. Young people, young men, for example, let's say you live in New York City or Chicago or whatever. You get on the subway, you see rampant crime. You see what happened to the soldier last year who got off. What was his name? I forget his name. And so you start to think to yourself, enough is enough. I want the government to step in and fix this problem. Crime is a big problem. Please, the government, please step in. We need a strong leader to deal with this. This is not just an American phenomenon. Look at what's happening across the world. Now, yes, Viktor Orban lost, but Viktor Orban was in power for a long time. Look at El Salvador. Look at Bukele. Look at what's happening there. The people of that country just got so fed up. They wanted a nationalist right-wing leader to come in to deal with the problems that they deemed very serious problems. So that is the reason, in my mind, that is the explanation. And I don't know what everyone else thinks, but that is the explanation as to why boomers have sort of shifted. Now, of course, there's still many 60 plus, 55 plus who are voting Republican. And of course, they have their own reasons for that. And as I said, there are God-fearing evangelical boomers who will vote Republican on a basis of morality and a basis of economics still. You know, they're traditional Republican voters, and they're not going to vote for Democrats, especially when the Democrats are going so far to the left, and liberal parties all over the place are going so far left. But I think that is really, in my mind, the explanation for what is going on here and why we're seeing this shift in demographics, voting patterns, and all of this. And it's an interesting thing. And I know maybe, a lot of people might find that like pointless and boring, but that is a development. And I think it's going to shape the way leaders are elected in the years to come. It's not going to be, and I know Republicans are frustrated by this and conservatives are frustrated by this because they say, well, now the Democrat Party is socialist. It's like AOC and Mandami. But the reason why AOC and Mandami are so popular is because the constituencies are looking for certain solutions, and those solutions tend to be more socialistic. That's just the truth. That's what they want. And so you're going to see more and more young people voting for those types of politicians for that very reason. And to me, honestly, it's just sort of a natural occurrence. I'm not really actually surprised by it. But that's what's happening. I've noticed this especially when it pertains to Trump specifically, that the boomers are very sour on him. And my interactions, just anecdotally, my interactions with people, which I don't really go there anymore. But when he first came on the scene and when he was running for the re-election for the first time during COVID, I had tons of political conversations and interactions with people about this. And it seemed to me that the most negative reaction to Trump always came from the boomer I was talking to. Young people, whatever, they kind of understand him a little more, but the boomers were just wrecked by him. And so, and I think I did a stream. I talked about that in one of my previous streams, and I cut the clip because I could see it happening. It was a very strange development. I'd never seen so many young people supporting the right-wing candidate and so many older people being against the right-wing candidate. So it was an interesting development that I don't think got enough attention. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about tonight. It's an interesting development. We can talk about it further. I wish I could read the entire Atlantic piece for you, but I was able to read more of it than here. Can we start a free trial, or do I have to like sign my life away just for the free trial? Then it starts billing me like $50 a month, $80 a year. My gosh. Wait a second. Wait, no. I had it. Where did I find that? Hold on. Let me check it here. Here it is. I think there's more. Okay, this is probably better. Hold on. Because there was a little bit more here. Let's see. Okay, so this part I already read to you. You can see the photo. Kind of an epic photo, honestly. Trump is focused on becoming one of history's great men by Ashley Parker and Michael Scherer. I know this guy. He's a total anti-Trumper. They try and write a hit piece, and they just make him look cooler and better. Had President Trump, we wondered, okay, I already read that part. This is where it cut off, right? Okay. Yes, okay. He's been talking recently about how he is the most powerful person to ever live, the confidant told us. He wants to be remembered as the one who did things that other people couldn't do because of his sheer power and force of will. And remember, I told you that there's no real agenda going on. It's the agenda is power, influence, expansion. That's how he thinks, not passing bills and all that. The tendency to self-aggrandize is a fundamental feature of Trump, as his sculpted hair and overlong red ties. But it has become even more important in setting his priorities and steering his actions as he hurdles through his final term in office. He no longer has to worry about the judgment of voters and can instead focus on what he's decided really matters, ascending to become one of history's so-called great men and leaving an enduring and, in many cases, physical imprint. The result, at least so far, has cost many lives and billions of dollars, damaged the world economy, strained already fragile alliances, and cratered the president's standing with the public. This is okay. Now we start to get into real Atlantic crap. But those around him cast his news as a liberation. Quote, he is unburdened by political concerns and is able to do what is truly right rather than what is in his best political interests, the administration official told us. Hence the decision to strike Iran. So he's not thinking about, I wonder what the base is going to think about this. Am I disappointing the base? No, he's not worried about that. He's not worried about political repercussions. He's not thinking in that manner. He's thinking about being a consequential figure that history is going to remember forever. And honestly, I think that's probably going to happen. I would say that he is definitely in the top 10 most consequential presidents of all time, maybe top 5. Maybe top 5. I mean, you just look at the way he has influenced the culture and the amount of oxygen he's sucked up in not just politics, but everywhere. It's he's sort of undoubtedly one of those figures. And I think he believes that Greenland, Iran, I guess Canada to an extent, this all fits in with the expansionist, nationalist, consequential, memorable world figure, world leader category. And so that's what he's striving for. And again, this connects to my original opinion about why boomers are now more liberal, because boomers are essentially liberals. They're libertarians. They're live and let live types. They don't want the government being strong. They don't want the leader being strong. They don't want Caesar. They want Ronald Reagan, and Reagan was a strong leader in his own right. But they want I don't know, like, who do they want? Like Thomas Massey or somebody? Young people, they do want a Caesar, I think. I think they do want somebody like that to just like take the reins and find a solution to these problems and just, full steam ahead, run the country like a business. And that's what they want. And that's why he has been a very formidable political figure, underestimated, because people tend to think that what the Republican base wants is limited government. And of course, there was a time when that's what they wanted, because the issues at that time were far different. The issues at that time were rampant inflation, the taxes were way too high, the government was involved in every aspect of life. And eventually people got tired of that and they said, we want to be freed from the chains of bureaucracy and taxes and overbearing department influence and power. And so we want the state to sort of get off our backs for a while, which I believe was one of the lines that Reagan used in his inaugural. The government needs to get off our backs. People want the government off their backs. And during that time, that had appeal because those were the problems of that time. And so I was watching Mark Halperin. Mark Halperin is actually a very good, kind of balanced show. And I was watching Mark Halperin. He was interviewing somebody, and I was kind of baffled by it. He said, the guest said he preferred that the Republican Party get back to the Bush era of conservative politics, the Bush-Romney kind of era. And I was thinking to myself, has this guy not lived through the last 15, 20 years? Like, has he just been hiding? Or, like, why would he think that you could apply that brand of conservatism to today's problems? It's just foolish. It's very stupid to think that you can run Ronald Reagan's platform in 2026, 2028. It's craziness. It underestimates and understates the amount of which Reagan's personality was more the appeal, not so much his politics. But even when it comes to the politics, the solutions for 1980 America were geared towards 1980 problems. That would be like Ronald Reagan running on the platform of Calvin Coolidge or something in 1980. It's just ridiculous and absurd. And for some reason, the Republican Party is so attached to that and will not let that go. It's possible to revere, respect, admire, and remember the greatness of Ronald Reagan, the man, the president, the figure, while at the same time accepting that today's problems are different. And I can guarantee you in 2.5 years, when there's a Republican primary, you're going to hear all of these Republicans talking about on stage about how they are more conservative than Ronald Reagan, and how would they handle this problem? Well, we would turn to the Reagan playbook. You're going to hear that over and over, and I strongly advise against that strategy. My light just changed, and now it changed back. I strongly advise against that strategy because, again, you are applying an ideology and applying solutions to problems that aren't really there anymore. The problems today aren't those problems. The problems today are different, more specific. Society has changed, and you need to realize that Republican voters want the government to be involved. It's just they care about different issues. They want the government to be involved in preventing crime, closing the border, and all of that. And of course, they can still be for low taxes and all the normal sort of Republican traditional boilerplate issues. But there needs to be an admission that the people do want. They may not want Julius Caesar, but they do want a strong state that is active in their favor. That's active in their favor. And what politics is now becoming is different groups wanting the government to do bidding on their behalf. And you can say that's a good thing or a bad thing or whatever you want to say, but that's the way it is. And it is so easy to see why that is. Because when you look at the problems facing society, when you look at the problems facing people, for example, if you are a young person, if you're 22 years old and you're thinking about getting a job, you're thinking about eventually buying a house, you're thinking about doing all these things, you're thinking about getting ahead, and you look and you realize that you may not ever even be able to buy a house. And then you see the Republican Party saying, don't depend on the government. You can't afford food. You can't afford a house. And I know this runs counter to a video that I made the other day about stop complaining and this is the greatest country ever. There's still opportunity. That's all very true. But the masses don't think in that way. The masses are struggling. The masses do want help. And the masses on the left want help. And the masses on the right want help. And the libertarian solutions don't work. And it's funny because libertarians used to be young people. It always used to be young people who were libertarian. Remember back when Ron Paul was running, 2006, 7, 8. All those people were in their late 20s, early 30s. There were young people supporting that candidate and that movement. Maybe some Tea Partiers mixed in there. Well, guess what? Those people aren't in their late 20s and early 30s anymore. They're in their early 50s now, mid 50s, maybe approaching 60 now. Ron Paul was popular 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So that the libertarian movement isn't young people anymore. Times have totally changed. So that's what we're looking at. That's the That's the lay of the land. And then you have many young people who are also turning to God, turning to religion, going to church in higher numbers now. And that has had an effect too, because as younger people search for meaning and search for some sort of grasp onto something larger than themselves in life, they may begin to become more right wing. That may drive more young people to the right, and that may drive them into more of a social conservative posture, which means they might support more government, but in favor of their social causes, their issues that they care about. So the future, to me, is not libertarianism and neoliberalism. The time of that has passed. And Steve Bannon brings this up all the time. You can like Steve Bannon or hate Steve Bannon. He brings up this point all the time, which is that the future is going to be one of two different paths. It's going to be populist right wing or populist left wing. So it's either going to be the MAGA populism of Bannon, or it's going to be the left wing populism of AOC, Madani, and that crowd. And people kind of have to decide where they sit on that spectrum. And obviously, the spectrum has totally changed. It used to be right limited government, left more government. Well, that's sort of over now. Now it's right more government for crime, immigration, and other issues, left more government for healthcare, education, and those issues. And whoever can push hard in their direction, whoever is the strongest leader, whoever seems the most capable to wield the state for their constituency is going to come out ahead. Trump realized this from the outset. And whether or not he's doing all this for his own self-aggrandizement or not, he has struck a chord, or did struck a chord. Obviously, he's going into the later part of his second term pretty soon, but the power of that Caesarism should not be lost on anybody. And so the boomers find themselves drifting away from that, because the boomers have always actually been liberal. They call themselves conservative, but what they actually are is neoliberal. They believe in the neoliberalism of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And that neoliberalism is coming under severe attack from both sides. And what you're constantly going to hear from the New York Times and The Economist and Financial Times and all these places is that neoliberalism is the answer to all our problems. Neoliberalism is what we need to get back to. But the people have kind of caught on that the neoliberalism is what has led to a lot of these problems. Neoliberalism and unfettered free trade has not been good for the United States of America. Neoliberalism, total open society, total open borders, total open markets, total unregulation and deregulation has not been good for the United States of America and its people. And thus, we have a situation where a figure came along and, I don't want to say exploited it, but realized it, saw the money sitting on the ground and said, wait a second, how come nobody is picking this up? There's a $100 bill in the middle of the street. No one has the guts to go and just pick it right up. The $100 bill was, look at all these issues people care about. Neither party is talking about it. Neither party is talking about immigration. Neither party is talking about crime anymore. Neither party is talking about these problems. Neither party is talking about trade and the country being taken advantage of. And I don't want this video to become like a Trump love fest, but seriously, this is why this movement has been so successful. And so we look at the older generation who grew up with neoliberalism trying desperately to grasp on to neoliberalism as they see it sort of floating out to shore. And they truly believe that it can be rescued, that somebody is going to come along, like Hillary Clinton or somebody is going to take the United States and bring it back to the neoliberal traditions of the 80s and 90s. That's not going to happen. When Jeb Bush ran for president, he had no traction at all. There's a reason for that, and it's not totally based on personality. A lot of it is, but because the issues have changed. You cannot run the George W. Bush Republican Party of 2003, 4, 5 in 2020 and 2016. It's just not going to work. Country's been hollowed out by unfettered free trade. Countries changed a lot from unfettered mass migration. Countries changed a lot in so many ways, and those just aren't the appealing messages anymore. And the Republican Party has to start realizing that sooner rather than later, or else it will lose. Because many people will look to the left and they will say, well, at least the left is offering solutions to my problems. The Republican Party just wants to say, no, we want to get the government out of your life, which maybe worked for a time when there was way too much government in their lives. But for most people, their main problem isn't that there's too much government. Their main problem, when they get on the subway every day and they're fearing for their life, that's not too much government. When they see a totally open border, that's not too much government. So they want the opposite of that. And there's been a leader that has provided an alternative to that, and that's why he's been so very successful. So anyway, kind of an esoteric stream, I know. Not my normal ranting and raving and cultural analysis and all that, but it is what it is for tonight. That's why the boomers are all turning into liberals. All right, thank you very much.